from Rand Swiss. Negative around you there, Gary. It doesn't seem to be too much green that you're covered by. Things aren't necessarily looking as hunky-dory as one would have hoped. The risk sentiment still coming off.
Yeah, so we actually started the day fairly positive. We had a lot of the top 40 moving into the green, and it slowly just trickled lower, and a lot of counters slowly turning red as the day progresses. As you mentioned at the top of the show, the volumes are going to be a little bit light today just because of the US Memorial Day holiday. This essentially signals the start of the summer vacation in the Northern Hemisphere. And that, I think, is going to take a little bit of volume out of the markets. It seems the focus is definitely shifting to Europe. So we're watching some of those dual listeds, but overall market's still treading water. As much as we are optimistic around a trade deal between the US and Japan, these side trade deals will only go so far to allay investor fears, and I think the real concern now is that China potentially cancels the trade talks altogether. That's what I think markets are really worried about, and that risk off sentiment still filtering into the market, that pushing our currency weak and pushing our market a little bit lower.
Yeah, the US will perhaps be a little happy at the fact that the founder and CEO of Huawei, Ren Zhengfei, has gone on to say that he doesn't see the need to perhaps see China retaliate to Apple by perhaps blacklisting that company. Does that help pander perhaps the situation? Do you think that perhaps plays into the hand of creating a more amenable solution here with the trade war?
Yeah, I think it's certainly striking the right tone. It's a tone that will get investors a little bit more excited. But if you have a look at it, the policies that have been implemented up until this point in the rising trade tensions, at least, if we're not going to call it an all-out trade war, is a tariff policy. And tariff policies are very much 19th century policies. They're not modern policies. And we can see that in that China's already started to move the final final leg of their production process to countries like Vietnam. We've seen Vietnamese exports increasing as China makes 95% of a good, transports the good to Vietnam, finishes the product in Vietnam, and then exports as a made in Vietnam product. So tariff barriers are easy to circumnavigate. And what we've seen with the blacklisting of Huawei, that's really been an alternate policy. It's been a real shot by the US at China, and that I think is why markets are so negative last week. So any sort of allayment of those fears, any sort of de-escalation, even if it's just in the rhetoric at this stage, is going to get investors a little bit more excited.
All right, so we hope to get some sense of positivity there. But if we bring it back home just a little with regards to earnings news, a big gainer today has been Telkom. Of course, their earnings having come out for the annual situation there. 9.7 odd million new subscribers, around 86% growth in those subscriber numbers. And this is all at the expense of their fixed line sort of service and business sort of dropping off. I spoke to the CEO a little earlier, and he says, yeah, it's par for the course and is expected at this point.
Certainly markets weren't expecting it, even if the CEO was expecting it. So we've got Telkom up, which was up almost 6% at one point. If you have a look at Telkom, though, I think what is expected is the slow movement from that fixed line business into the mobile business. So we saw mobile service revenue up, I think it was 58%. So significant gains being made on the mobile front. Yeah, potentially slightly at the expense of the fixed line business. I don't know how much cannibalization there is there. But I think Telkom also, being a very small player, they're able to get these sort of big moves off a low base compared to the likes of MTN and Vodacom. If you look at it, there's also speculation now that they're going to unbundle their property portfolio. That's been mentioned, and that could certainly be interesting if we see that unbundling as a REIT on the local exchange. I think that will unlock some value from shareholders. But all in all, the numbers this morning were certainly a beat of expectations. If you look at the profit line and the EBITDA line, EBITDA I think coming in above 10 billion. Market was expecting below. So it was a beat on consensus expectations, and that's why you're seeing the stock price moving up as much as it is.
Yeah, and I suppose, having chatted to the CEO, like I said, he says that they're willing to perhaps use old cabling or old infrastructure that they've had where the copper was, and perhaps, reconfigure that and try to find a new way. And with all that infrastructure, it should make them a lead at some point. And if their subscriber numbers keep growing as they have in this last annual year, that makes them a real challenge for the likes of Cell C, doesn't it?
Certainly for the likes of Cell C, but again, there's I suppose a move that potentially you could see a tie-up between Cell C and Telkom, really just to try, especially in the mobile space, to try and take on the likes of Vodacom and MTN, which are just so entrenched in our markets. Telkom is now, even if we don't look at an acquisition potentially of Cell C, they are planning an aggressive rollout. They were talking about building another 2,000 towers in the near future. So this is a company that certainly has its eye set on growth and is being led by a very dynamic management team. So if we look at where the share price has come from in the last 3-4 years, it's been a significant appreciation, and I think shareholders in Telkom should be very, very happy, especially when you compare it to the rest of the stocks in our local market, which have been really stuck in the kind of general malaise.
Yeah. Okay. What happens to that Brent price then, Gary? $68 odd now a barrel. The hope is that it stays below 70, but that's for us, South Africa, especially as a oil importing nation. What do the oil exporters do?
It depends on the oil exporter that you're looking at. If you're looking at an oil exporter like Venezuela, I suppose their cost of production is absolutely massive compared to someone like Saudi Arabia, who, by some estimates, have certain wells that can produce oil at as little as $2 to $3 a barrel. Yeah. So it depends very much on the oil producer you're talking about. Looking at the slight dip off that we've had in the oil price at the moment, as well as commodity prices in general, I think part of this is coming from a slightly weaker dollar. We've had a very, very robust dollar as we had that kind of risk-off sentiment, people moving into the safe haven assets, dollar and treasury bonds being one, treasury bills at least being one of them. So some of that oil price, I think, is the other side of the pair. It's not necessarily a movement necessarily in oil, but more a movement in the dollar.
Yeah. All right, Gary. Really appreciate your time. Awesome chatting to you this Monday. Have a wonderful week, and we'll chat soon again there. That market sitting in negative territory there, as you can tell, around 0.1% weaker thus far with regards to how the market is faring. For now, though, that's how we close off that market picture. Negativity when it comes to South Africa's rand as well. But as I said, I did get to